Welcome back, everybody. Don Coleman, Dustin Hawkins. As you know, it's episode 25. Who we have on the other day?
So we had Mike Hawes from Red Barn Farms. He runs an unbelievable program. He shares his story. The type of program which Don will talk about is a therapeutic community program. Basically, he's working with prison inmates. They're given the option whether they can stay in prison or they can come do his 2-year program. He talks about his story, how he ended up getting into it, and it's pretty inspiring and pretty interesting.
Inspiring, interesting, and controversial. I'd say very controversial. Therapeutic communities, it's you'll have some people that say all they do is beat the clients down there and they don't give them enough love. And then other people say, you kidding me? Breaking them down is exactly how you have to get them to be able to change. And coming from a therapeutic community model myself, the time when I'd been sober for many years, I'm a big fan of him. You'll probably see me smiling at some of the things that he says, but I think that they draw a good balance between your typical treatment center and something that might just be like, a labor type program. This so much different. You're talking about changing the world here. So you're going to hear about something that you haven't heard of yet on the War Podcast.
Yeah, and he's a very, the way he speaks and talks, he's very influential. And I loved what he said. A lot of the stuff, hard work, discipline,
integrity,
kind of the language I use in my own recovery, and a lot of his philosophy is similar to the philosophy that I would have, that I work when I'm working with people that I use.
Certainly.
So I'm excited for you guys to hear it.
Absolutely. Well, let's roll the podcast.
Like I said, growing up here in Utah, I think one of my earliest memories was, I was looking at some pictures the other day, and, I was a short, little, chubby, insecure little boy that really just didn't feel like he fit in anywhere. I come from a family of athletes. My dad was a, superstar basketball player, was actually drafted to go play in the NBA. And so I lived under this burden of potential my whole entire life. I remember hearing, Mike, you've got so much potential, what's going on? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't really feel like I'm holding back. And so as I moved through life, and there's a picture that I was looking at that I was going to my first day of kindergarten. And I've kind of got this frown on my face and kind of almost like this sad look. And I think everyone needs to know that I come from a family that was very supportive, a very religious family, which is a big part of my story. A stay-at-home mom that took us everywhere, soccer, golf, very active in the scouting, organization. One of the requirements of my family was you had to become an Eagle Scout. You had to go on a Mormon mission. You had to get married in the temple. So my life was really planned out from an early age. And so as I look back, and I think about growing up, was I predisposed to become a drug addict? I don't think so. Was I predisposed with anxiety, insecurities? I matured later on in life. So I remember my buddies starting to shave, and I was embarrassed to shower, in junior high because I hadn't hit puberty yet. And so I always kind of felt like I was a little bit different.
Right.
And so for me, my first drink that I took was a junior in high school at Viewmont High School. It was 1 part Everclear and 1 part Sunny Delight. And as bad as it tasted going down, I remember when that hit my stomach and all of a sudden all these insecurities went away. It was like, okay, I can come out and play.
Right.
I felt taller. I felt
Mike's
good
here,
looking.
guys.
Yeah, like I'm here. I've arrived, right? And I remember thinking to myself, because, I am a 12-step guy. Alcoholics Anonymous has saved my life. And the book talks about how, we like the effects of drinking alcohol. I like banana pudding. I like a good cheeseburger. I loved the effects of alcohol. And I remember thinking to myself, we're going to do this a lot.
Right.
And so as I continued through high school, I always had this goal that my family had set for me to go on a mission. I developed a lot of guilt and shame around that, because then I was drinking. I had my first experience with marijuana, but then I had to hide it. I had to, cover that up. And so, needless to say, I did go out on a Mormon mission. It was one of the greatest 2 years of my life. I went to Ecuador, to South America.
Oh, wow.
It was a beautiful experience. The people of Ecuador are absolutely amazing. I was able to learn another language. I was able to learn a work ethic. But most importantly, I learned the importance of service work.
Wow.
So my desire to use something to cover up these feelings was remedied by the service work I was engaged in South America for 2 years.
Wow.
So that feeling to be a part of, was actually satisfied by being engaged in, the work that I was doing, the service work I was doing, the message I was carrying. It was unbelievable. But almost immediately when I came back from South America, I went up to Utah State. Actually, it's really important for you guys to know. I went up there on a golf scholarship. And so I went up there to play golf, and it was my first year back. Like, any good golfer, I kind of took it personal that, you golfers aren't athletes, right? So I went into the gym that off season with the football players.
Right.
Sustained an injury in my back. Herniated my L4, L5. And I remember going to the team doctor, and he handed me what ended up becoming my biggest nemesis for the rest of my life, which was opiates.
Right.
And his words are so clear in my mind, like he said it to me yesterday, was, Mike, this is between you and me. No one else needs to know about this. Come to me when you need these. So immediately it was just became this process of, pain pills, muscle relaxers, and it developed into what became an opiate addiction, which really led me down this path to really this path of enlightenment of where I'm at today. My biggest curse, my biggest challenge or obstacle has now become my biggest blessing. But there was a time period there where, I was doing anything that I could to get these pain pills, robbing, stealing. Fast forward a little bit, I graduate from college with a marketing degree, went into pharmaceutical sales. I mean, that's a great.
Wait, so that's so you're saying fast forward. So just real quick. So
yeah.
So you were robbing, stealing before college, you're saying?
During college.
Okay,
during college. So I'd come over to your house. I'd rummage through your bathroom. If you had pain pills there, grandparents. I mean, it was one of those things where, I would do whatever it would take. And at that point, I obviously wasn't getting high anymore, right? It was just to avoid getting sick. So I'd made that connection. But I still had this pain in my back. So subconsciously, I still feel like it's a legitimate injury. But as I made my way through college and graduated, I was enamored with pharmaceutical sales and that whole lifestyle. And so I got hired to become a pharmaceutical sales rep. Well, that's a great job for a drug addict, right? I spent a lot of time in drug closets. I had access to DEA numbers. I could talk like a nurse or a doctor, so I could call in my own scripts. That went on for a few years. During that time period, I got married. Of course, I got married in the LDS temple because that was one of the requirements of my family. Even though I didn't feel worthy, I mean, there was a lot of guilt and shame, but, it's amazing how many pills you can take, and that will, kind of soften that guilt and shame. So, this is about 2000, 2001. I married, actually moved to Vegas, got involved with the real estate market down there. So I moved jobs from pharmaceutical sales into real estate. My wife and I, seemed on the outside, we're living a pretty good life.
Right.
Even though inside I felt, dead. I felt like I was living this lie. And I really did not see an exit. I didn't see a way out. Well, 2004, my wife came to me and said, hey, we're going back to Utah to visit your parents. My mother and father both they celebrate their birthdays the first week of May.
Right.
So we come back to Utah, we walk into the family room, and it was just like an episode out of Intervention. My whole family's sitting there. My mom's in tears. I think I'm walking into a birthday party, but everyone's sitting there with their letters, and they all start to proceed to read these letters about how they care about me. Yep. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I was madder than hell because I thought to myself, at the time, you guys have no idea what I'm going through, the pressure, I just had every excuse in the world. And so my family began to do an intervention. And that was the first time that it was brought to my attention that I remember that everyone knew what was going on with my cause. Everyone knew that he was living a lie and that he had a drug problem. I mean, I looked like hell. You know, I was the guy that would go to dinner and I would start nodding off. And so I'd excuse myself from dinner, go in the bathroom, pop a few more pills, throw a little water on my face and say, I got this, and go out. Next thing I know, my face is in my mashed potatoes, right?
Yeah. Right.
You know, and I thought that was normal. That's what was so messed up about this whole thing is, you know, I got this, because on the surface I had the beautiful wife, I had the car, I had the job, I had the house. And then it got to a point to where my wife said, basically, listen, you got to go to rehab. You got to go do this. So I went begrudgingly. Right. I firmly believe that I did it just in spite, really, my entire family, my wife, and I went and did 30 days in a place in Tucson, Arizona called Cottonwood de Tucson. It's one of those high-priced, you know, you get the acupuncture detox where they put the needles in your ears, and you know, you get massages, and they have a pool and all this great stuff. And I only stayed 30 days. And then I came out, and within 6 months, I was using again. And so people will say to me, they'll say, well, Mike, so that rehab didn't work for you. And I find myself saying, no, it actually did. It planted the seed, because I remember looking, they had the 12 steps up on the wall. I remember reading, you know, we were powerless and our lives were unmanageable. But I remember thinking, they're for you. They're for you. They're not for me.
So
Your
true.
life is so much worse off than my life. I still have my wife. I got my job waiting for me. My life is still, I would say, yeah, maybe I might be a little powerless, but my life is not unmanageable.
You guys have no idea who you're dealing with.
Exactly. Right. I've got this figured out, right? So long story short, I get out of rehab. I come back. We're living in Vegas at the time. And within 6 months, just coincidentally or ironically, whatever the word is, I'm walking through the airport on a business trip, and one of the guys I used to get high with, I passed him, we saw each other, and before I knew it, he handed me 5 Lortab 10s and said, you got a long flight, this will help you. And before I knew it, even though I hadn't put them into my body, I'd already made that decision to use those.
Yeah.
So then I'm off. Exactly. So then
search them.
I'm off to the races, right? I'm off again. And from 2004 to 2010, there was, and that's kind of a big blur for me, because I got right back onto where I left off. I wasn't drinking a lot at the time, but I was using a lot of pharmaceuticals, a lot of benzos, a lot of opiates, a lot of muscle relaxers in combination, things like that. And my wife finally came to me and said, listen, either you get sober and get this figured out, or I'm done. And I basically made a conscious decision in that moment and said, fine, good luck.
Well,
and I chose the drugs without admitting it. I chose the drugs over her.
And you believed her too? She was being said.
Yeah, I wanted her out of my life.
Gotcha.
She was
a hindrance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
She was killing my buzz.
Yeah.
So I didn't want her. I had money, I had freedom, and she was the one that was holding me back. And so that just drove me further and further and further. Well, I come back to Utah. It's 2010 at the time, and something happened with a drug deal, and my dealer ended up going to prison. And at this time, I was so far down because I was taking 40 to 50 Lortab or Percocets a day that I couldn't get my hands on that many, that I was introduced to methadone. I didn't go to a methadone clinic. I was just introduced to it by someone that said, this will help you so you don't get sick. And they were the wafers that, you know, you could break up into fourths, into quarters. And I remember taking a quarter in the morning and then a quarter in the evening. And I did that for 2 years. Wow. My dealer got popped.
So
he went back.
You kept it managed. You were literally just doing morning and evening.
Yeah, I wasn't doing it to get high. I was just doing it not to get sick.
Right.
And I had no idea that there were methadone clinics. I hadn't even heard of Suboxone. I had no idea. And that's probably part of my resentment towards medication-assisted therapy, is because the detox off methadone was like nothing I've ever experienced.
Worst, I hear.
Yeah, I hear it goes into your bones. It gets into your marrow. I mean, it's just, it was living hell for 6 weeks for me. So when I ran out of drugs, I do what I always do, is I panic. I called my brother and I said, dude, I need some help. He came and scooped me up, took me back up to the University of Utah. So now this is the second time I've been to uni. And now I'm leaning on family to say, hey, I need to get some help. My dad came and visited me and said, there's a place in Baton Rouge, Louisiana that's a boys' ranch that the family will help, because my other brothers had been there, because again, you know, addiction runs in my family. Sure. A lot of us, you know, have our own story. Right. He says, we'll send you to a place called St. Christopher's. I said, all right, cool. So I call it my redneck rehab experience. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Boys Ranch. It was more of a therapeutic community. It was more about discipline. It wasn't a 12-step facility. I learned some more, but I still hadn't gotten to a point where I was willing to surrender. I hadn't gotten to a point where I was willing to even admit that I was a drug addict or an alcoholic. I hadn't got to the point where I had hit this bottom where I didn't feel like, I could still control and manage a few things in my life. So I only did 30 days down there. It was a 6-month program. I did 30 days. I came home, and as soon as I came home, I do the second thing that I do all the time is when things get tough in my life, I run. I had a buddy who was living in Argentina, and as soon as I got back, I saved up a little bit of money and bought a one-way ticket and went to Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Wow.
I was not planning on coming back from Argentina. I was
Why
planning
Buenos Aires?
because that's where he was.
Okay. Good.
That's where his family was. They had businesses there. He just says, Mike, if you need to get away, come down here for a little bit, get away from family. And so I was always, I'm a sprinter in the game of life, right? I do really good coming out of the gates. But once it turns into a marathon or gets long distance, then I just crash and burn. I can't sustain a pace. And so I went down there, and I was planning on being there forever. And I told my family, I'm out of here. I never want to see you guys again. There was probably some sense of relief on their part, like, hey, at least Mike's out of our, because I was just chaos. Anytime I came around, it was like, it was bad. And so I was down there 9 months, and that 10th month I was down there, and we were heavily involved in drugs and, the whole scene down there, and it's at a whole nother level in South America. My buddy one night went out. I wasn't with him, and was involved in a situation to where he was out to make a purchase, ended up using, I think it was a combination of oxycodone and cocaine, and he died of a drug overdose. So when Carlos died, I thought to myself, well, I got to go back home. I got to go back, and I can't stay down here. I saw myself on that same path, that I was next.
Yeah.
I come back to the States within 3 months. So this is now 2012, June 29th, 2012. My little brother, Dustin Hawes, died of a heroin overdose. So when I lost Carlos and then I lost Dustin, and I'd gotten to this point where I was just, I was physically, emotionally, spiritually, I was just completely bankrupt on every level. I remember having the feeling every time I went to bed of drinking and whatever I could put into my body. Every time I woke up that next morning, I was pissed that I would wake up. And so when I lost my little brother, for whatever reason, we talk about those moments, those aha moments, those, epiphanies that we have in our life. That one hit so close to home because at the time, being his older brother, being in a worse place than he was actually sober when he went out that night and used. He was living in one of the sober living homes here in Utah. And I'll always remember my parents going to visit Dustin the night before he died, and my mom saying to my dad, Rich, something doesn't feel right here.
That mother's gut.
Yeah, something's not right. Could it be that there's 20 guys living in one bedroom, or could it be that there's no supervision? There's many, we have all these questions that, haunted us for a long time. And then we got the phone call the next morning that he was dead.
Man.
And so when that happened in my life, I really felt like, okay, here's my last chance. And even, this is the insanity of my addiction, is even after we lost Dustin, it was the day that I was going up. He's buried in the Bountiful Cemetery, up at Lakeview Cemetery by the Bountiful Temple. I was driving up there to meet a gentleman to purchase some burial plots because we weren't ready for this. My family wasn't ready to start burying people. So I'm driving up, and as I'm coming back down off the mountain, it's probably 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, right before the Centerville exit here in Davis County, Utah. I roll my car on the freeway. So I roll it across all the lanes into the ditch between the frontage road and I-15. And I remember climbing out of my car, dusting myself off and thinking, oh my gosh, I've got a bottle of vodka in there.
Right.
So I got to climb back in there. Now it's 9:30 in the morning. Most people haven't had their first drink for the day. Me?
Right.
I've already had mine, right? Well, a lot of people like
haven't even had breakfast yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people mix cream and sugar with their coffee. I mix tequila, vodka, whatever I had with my coffee,
Yeah.
right? So I climbed back in my car, grabbed that bottle of vodka. I remember tossing it, and as soon as I tossed it, the police pulled up, came up to me, wanted to give me a field sobriety test. I said, absolutely not. I'm just shook up because my little brother just died. I just crashed my car. And I remember sitting in the ambulance, and this is still me trying to hold on to my control. But I said, you guys don't have a warrant. They said, we're going to take your blood. I said, you don't have a warrant for that.
Right.
And they had a fax machine sitting there in the ambulance, and he pulled a fax off. He says, here it is right here. And as soon as he did that, he stuck me, drew my blood. Next thing I remember, I was in the hospital, handcuffed to the hospital bed. Now, this was within a couple of days of losing my little brother.
Gosh.
That's how off the reservation I was. So I remember getting bailed out of jail, sitting down at Red Barn. At the time, we had no idea what Red Barn was going to become.
Right.
And I remember sitting there with my dad, and my dad did something for me at the time that he still to this day doesn't fully realize. And he sat there across the table, just like Dustin and I are, and says, Mike, we just lost your little brother. Are we going to lose you too? And I remember that hitting me, and I had that moment of really, I thought to myself, this is the first, am I going to make it through this? Right. And he says, what can we do as a family to support you? And it was the first time in my life he actually asked me my opinion, what I thought. And now it became my idea. We call that in the industry, motivational interviewing, right?
Absolutely.
So now all of a sudden I said, well, Dad, there's this place I'd like to go. I've heard good things about it. And he says, all right. He says, let me check it out. He says, give me 24 hours. I'll get back to you and we'll let you know. Within 30 minutes, he calls me. Let's get you on an airplane. Let's get you out of here. I went to a facility called Hazelden, which is now Betty Ford Hazelden.
Right.
And that's what really started me on this journey of where I'm at today. It reinforced how important the 12 steps are in my life. It reinforced a sponsorship or a mentor, the service component, the spiritual component. I definitely don't see myself as a religious individual. I'm very active in service and in the community and those that I work with. And when I came back from Hazelden, that's when I sat down with my dad at the same table, and he looked at me and he says, what can we do to be part of the solution here in our community? Because see, at the time we were faced with one of two options. Either we continue in denial, pretending there wasn't a problem here in
Which
Little
is
Davis
deadly.
County, right?
Deadly. You just learned that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or we use our resources and the Red Barn to become part of the solution. Right. So immediately we started having family groups. We started hosting Al-Anon meetings and 12-step meetings. It took me 2 years, but I reached out to Blue there from Addict to Athlete for 2 years. I said, Blue, we got to get Addict to Athlete here at Red Barn. So we finally opened up Davis County Addict to Athlete. We started Smart Recovery there. Went and got certified in Smart Recovery. Right. And then like any good addict, right, I went back to school because now I'm going to become a counselor and save the world, right? So I went back and got a social work degree at University of Utah, got really connected through their substance use, the SUD-C program that's up there. That's where I met guys like Sean McMillan at First Step House,
Right.
Santiago Cortez,
Right.
all these guys, Dr. Dusso, all these guys were my professors. Beverly, who was the clinical director up at Cirque Lodge.
Utah legends.
Yeah, they're amazing. And so that's where the light started to go on for me. And I had this dream. My dad and I came together and said, what can we do to use this farm to help support individuals and families through hard work, really, and housing and jobs. Jobs and housing were really our focus. Right. And I remember reading, and as I mentioned to you earlier, Don, about this program in San Francisco called Delancey Street Foundation.
Right.
And I said, we got to go. We got to go check this out. So I grabbed my board members. We went down there. We spent a week down there. I worked in their restaurant. I remember my dad worked in their automotive department. It was just the most amazing experience in the world because it was the first time in my life that I had heard someone say, it's not about the drugs. It's not about the alcohol. It's about the behavior. If we can change the behavior, the drugs, the alcohol, all that becomes a moot point.
Right.
And that really started to resonate. And I applied that to my little brother, Dustin, who'd been to multiple treatment centers, in and out of jail many, many times. And I thought, if he would have had an opportunity to go somewhere like Delancey Street, would he have had a better chance to be successful in life? And the answer was absolutely yes.
Absolutely.
So we started really visiting different treatment centers all over the United States, up in Canada, the Vulcan Academy. We went and spent a week up there. And we really started to develop this model really centered around integrity, a discipline, and a length of time. And I think all of us would agree that there's no substitute for length of time.
Right.
The challenge in the industry is no one can offer those services for that long a period of time that
Right.
most of us need in order to, get
Yeah.
back on our feet and develop those skills.
Yeah, 90 days isn't enough.
Not for this drug addict.
Right.
I mean, I've been
Right.
doing it hard, consistently for over 10 years, and it wasn't going to change for me in 90 days.
Right.
So I went and got a job at Davis Behavioral Health as a case manager. I learned a lot. I did that for about 3 years, learned a lot from the clinical side. We partnered up with them. We started a recovery.
And you're still in research mode at this point? Or
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
we wanted to become a nonprofit because I think for us and my family, it was important to be transparent. And so we set up Red Barn as a 501c3. We wanted to make sure that we were an open book as a public charity to the community. And that was part of our mission. And so in the beginning, we were just offering support groups. We put up the facility. We had Recovery Day Davis County 2013 down there. We started doing a lot of different events down there to really just shine the light on addiction. We didn't
Right.
really know what we were doing,
Right.
but we felt something very therapeutic and cathartic by just telling our story. So we would bring families in and share hope and just support and love and give them a forum to be able to just open up and share,
Right.
so they didn't feel alone. And then we got to this point where we were running groups at Red Barn, and I had this thought one day because when I run a group, it's awesome, right? So I'm thinking, oh man, everyone had this wonderful experience. And then I get a phone call from one of my peers in recovery, and he's at the liquor store. And I look at my watch, and I'm on the phone. I'm thinking, dude, we just finished group 30 minutes ago. What happened, right?
What are you missing, man? Yeah.
And I realized at the time is they needed a place to stay, to live. They needed a certain amount of time to stay at the farm, to be away from all the distractions of the outside world and all the temptations. And they just weren't strong enough to be able to come to, one group once or twice a week and go back and do life. And so we started developing a recovery residence. And, part of one of my goals when I got sober was I got very involved up at the state capitol. So that's where I got hooked up with, some of the Santiago Cortezes and Mary Jo McMillans.
Yes.
And started doing advocacy. And so they asked me to come sit on the Recovery Residences Committee because of my experience with my little brother dying in a sober living home, and saying, listen, what can we do to put some structure around this so we don't have these tragedies down the road? So I got involved with that, and I remember thinking, we've got to build a recovery residence at Red Barn. At the time, we were still thinking that maybe it was going to be a residential treatment center. We weren't exactly sure the direction we were going, but we were enamored with therapeutic communities. We were enamored with the work program, the discipline, the confrontation, confronting those behaviors.
Absolutely.
And so we kept coming back to that. But we were being pulled a bunch of different ways because we had Davis Behavioral Health saying you need to be clinical, the industry saying, well, you got to be clinical so you can bill out insurances, the criminal justice system, even saying, hey, you got to have counselors and therapists, you got to have medication-assisted therapy, you got to do all these things. So we tried to stay open-minded, but we kept coming back to the TC model, until finally, after a series of events of trying to become a residential treatment center, I will say we tried to become accredited. I remember having a meeting.
JCAHO?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just getting licensed as an RTC. I had a meeting out at the farm with Blue Cross Blue Shield. I remember one of their representatives came out, and I was showing them the farm, and I was really excited because we have beehives there, right? And I said, we do this really cool workshop with the bees,
Yeah.
right? And worker bees are like good drug addicts, right?
Right.
Worker bees only live for like 50 or 60 days. And like a good drug addict with enough money, none of us would be here.
Right,
One of the
right.
things that saved me is I'd run out of money or I'd end up in jail or something. So we do this balance, finding balance in our lives with bees. And I remember the lady saying,
Not a chance.
No, you are not going to do these workshops.
Right.
And then I took her into the greenhouse and I said, we believe that if our students, and that's what we call them at Red Barn, can get their hands in dirt, that there's certain microbes and there's certain energies that can happen to actually help with mood stabilizers and anxiety. And she goes, wait, aren't those fertilizers over there? And I said, well, yeah, it's a greenhouse. She goes, no, we can't do that. Yeah. And so every time I walked around and I said, we've got the horses and we got the alpacas, and she was like, no, you're going to sit in this little box.
Right.
And I remember thinking, man,
that our way.
That didn't go well.
Processing groups and individual therapy.
Right.
Yep.
And so then I had Medicaid come out about a week later, same experience. So I lost my mind. I just said, this is just not going to work. And I remember going to the board and saying, you guys, we can't go this way. And so they said to me, all right, then what are we going to do here? And I said, if I'm going to be the director here of Red Barn, I said, there's only one way that I know how to live a recovery lifestyle. And they said, well, what is that? And I said, it's integrity, it's hard work, it's discipline. I said, and you will work your ass off because I take my recovery very, very seriously. My sobriety date of July 26, 2012 is the most important date in my life. And I firmly believe that, because without that, I wouldn't have my family. Right. I mean, my wife and I just had a little baby boy, which is it's still.
And this is your same wife?
No, so we got divorced from the one. This is my second wife. Okay. We've only been married 4 years now.
Gotcha.
But the blessings that I've received as a result of being sober and in sobriety, it's tough for me to even believe it. And I'm experiencing it on a daily basis. And so when I went to the board and said, listen, this is going to be the way we run our program, which essentially is a therapeutic community.
Right.
And it's based on the discipline, consistency of discipline for a length of time. And so we don't have insurance companies saying, you've got to do it this way. You can run group this way. You've got to, what's nice is because we're not a medical facility, I don't have to hide behind HIPAA, 42 CFR, we don't have to keep medical records. We are licensed today as a residential life skills academy. Wow. Is what we are. And in fact, this last year we were excited because we worked with the Other Side Academy on House Bill 468 in order to get a license with the state that supports really what our mission is, what TOSA's mission is, the Other Side Academy, and what's very similar to what's been done with Delancey Street in San Francisco.
Right.
So, where we're at today, we've got 12 students in our program. We opened up the residential component October of last year. Wow. It's very difficult to get into Red Barn. I would say we get at least 15 to 20 letters a week, multiple emails, phone calls. The process works by having a letter written, advocating for themselves to want to come to our 2-year program. I spent a lot of time in jails interviewing those people that I received letters from, gauging their level of motivation, which is kind of funny because I remember my past. I would do anything I could to get out of jail. Now I'm doing anything I can to get into jail.
That's funny.
And where I need some help, and if anyone is listening here in Weber County, we need help getting into the Weber County jail. We can get into Utah County Jail. We're in Davis County Jail, and we're working with the Other Side Academy right now on getting into Salt Lake County Jail. So I go in there. And, we don't bat 1,000, even though there are candidates that I believe would be successful at Red Barn. A lot of these judges are sending them to prison. Right. That's their go-to. That's kind of been their experience. And so sometimes it's a little frustrating because I think that, the program that we offer these individuals is a great alternative to prison. Not only does prison cost, I've heard somewhere between $30,000 to $40,000 a year, taxpayer money.
At least.
Wow. We don't take any government funding. We don't take any tax dollars from, state or federal. When our students are accepted in the program, they're 100% scholarshiped. Wow. So it is a work program.
And you reform them.
That's the goal.
Right. Yeah.
That's the goal.
I mean,
I don't
you're
giving
understand why
them
judges are against it.
You're giving them an alternative to prison.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I sit down with them to put it in perspective, let's say a guy's got a 0 to 5, right? He's never been to prison before. It's a possession charge. It's nonviolent. I make it very clear to him, listen, you can go do your prison time and you may do 10, 12 months, right? You're not going to do your full 5 years. If you come to Red Barn and violate and fail, you will do your full 5 years. I was in a courtroom 2 weeks ago in American Fork where I was advocating for a student that had 1 0 to 5. And the judge looked at him and said, listen, if you go to Red Barn and you sprain a finger or you get depressed or you get kicked by a horse or something happens and you fail at Red Barn, he says, not only will you do the 5 years, I'm going to give you another 5 years for wasting my time and wasting Red Barn's time. Wow. So the kid's got 10 years hanging over his head. Yeah. So you start trying to wrap your head around that. 2 years at Red Barn, which you know, I know Dustin's been out there. It's a compared to prison, it's a pretty nice place. You've got animals, you've got gardens, you've got greenhouse. I mean, it's a beautiful facility. So in his mind, he's thinking, all right, 10 years, 2 years, I can go do the 2 years.
Right.
You know, if someone just wants to go do time, then they can go do time. But I would say 90% of those that apply to get into Red Barn aren't necessarily appropriate for Red Barn. And the last thing I want to do is bring someone in and have them fail.
Certainly.
So I'd much rather be hard on them on the front end. So they say, hey, yeah, that Mike, he's a real jerk, than to bring them in and maybe they do 2 months or 3 months. You know, guys like us, we don't need any more failures added to our list.
Right. You're so right. And plus you have a community to worry about too. You have a community dynamic, which often TCs work itself out. But I mean, you bring a cancer into the community and it affects 12 people.
Well, in Farmington, in the beginning, when we first applied to get our zoning for Red Barn, they denied our zoning application. And so we actually had to sue Farmington City under the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Federal American Disabilities Act. Right. And they fought us for almost a year. Wow. Until finally they realized they weren't going to win that battle. And what's interesting about that, and this is how God works in my life, is the individual that was on record, that's a city councilman that will remain nameless, said, we don't need another drug house here in Farmington City. Well, 6 months after that, he was the one who called me and said, Mike, my son's hooked on heroin.
Yes.
Will you come help me out? And I said, absolutely, happy to do it. So part of it is the education piece. Part of it is, you know, it doesn't hit home for some of these people just yet. But we believe that we're not, you know, that we are actually reforming them. We're helping change behavior, and we're setting them up to become productive members of society.
Productive, absolutely.
Well, yeah, talk a little bit about your rules inside there. That's what blew my mind when I was taking the tour, and you were showing me how they made their beds and their sock drawers, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we believe at Red Barn that the students that we work with, myself included, I consider myself one of the students, is we're the most undisciplined people in this world.
Right.
So the first thing we need to develop is discipline. So it all starts with, and I'm sure you guys have seen the YouTube videos about making your bed. And if you do one thing right today, you're going to make your bed right.
Right.
That's where we start. We teach them how to fold their clothes. We teach them how to do their laundry. We teach them how to brush their teeth. We teach them how to properly clean a toilet. And I learned this at the Other Side Academy when I was living there. And I remember thinking, man, this toilet, you know, it's really clean right now. And my welcomer or mentor at Other Side Academy says, Mike, you're not cleaning the toilet, you're cleaning your mind. And so we teach these guys that through these mundane, these tedious activities, that you can get through those without getting high. So it is recovery boot camp. Their beds are made perfect. They are early to group. On time is late, and late is unacceptable. You'll have 2 hours of community service if you wake up 1 minute after 6 a.m. So most of these guys are up by 5:30 every single day. Wow. Holidays and weekends. They're down doing the chores. They got to take care of the chickens. We've got sheep. We've got alpacas, dogs, cats. The greenhouse needs to be attended to right now. And then you've got a group that's doing breakfast. And then they all have mealtime together. And then we have a pre-workout meeting that we call it at 7:30, and then we're on the job site by 8 a.m. Wow. They work their guts out till 4 p.m. They're back. There's a group that does chores. There's a group that does the meal prep. After dinner, they have a life skills workshop. That life skills workshop goes every day from 6 to 7 p.m. We cover topics like budgeting, finance, little things like, you know, how to set up a bank account, how to get a credit card, what is credit repair. That was the class last night because we do Tuesdays. Wednesday night is a nutrition class. So we have a nutritionist that comes in from Utah State. Thursday night, I teach a group called Recovery Capital. We talk about how they can build their recovery capital account and enlarge that.
I like that.
I thought you would like that, being a finance guy.
I like that a lot. Well, yeah, the metaphor, everything. That's great.
Yeah. And then we do a mind-body bridging class, a mindfulness class, a leadership class. So someone will ask me, how am I successful at Red Barn? And I learned this from my buddy Dave at Tosa. I said, it's real easy. You get up, you go to work, you have a good attitude, you go to bed. You get up, you go to work, you have a good attitude, you go to bed. You do that every single day for 2 years, and we can help you recalibrate that moral compass in your head.
Wow.
Because these are learned behaviors. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be honest today. Guys like us don't do that. You know, I had a little confrontation with one of my
do that. I mean,
exactly. And
easily.
I had a confrontation, little incident with one of my students the other day that was telling me that I needed to give him a break. And he says, Mike, you preach progress, not perfection. And I said, okay. I said, break it down for me. And he says, well, check this out. He says, I've lied to you a lot less today than I did yesterday. And I said, you know what? You're right. Today you probably only lied to me 10 times. Yesterday it was probably 20, right? He says, you've seen my rap sheet. He goes, I got 26 felonies. He goes, I've been arrested 26 times and thrown in jail 26 times. Wow. I'm a hardened criminal. He goes, give me a break. And that's the beauty of my job, is I get to interact with these guys on a daily basis and have these moments and these reminders that at the end of the day, people say, what's Red Barn about? I said, it's about love and discipline. And those two things together is what will change someone's heart to where they'll be open-minded enough and will accept the direction that we're giving them to where they can change this behavior. But it takes time. There's no substitute for time.
Like, so these guys that are in there, I mean, what have you seen some pretty incredible transformations?
Oh, it's unbelievable, Dustin.
Really?
I mean, if I hadn't experienced it firsthand, and it doesn't happen in 6 months, it'll happen in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I've got a guy right now, I love him to death, but he's going to be one of our best, coolest success stories. He's got brass knuckles tattooed right here on this side of his neck, and then he's got his daughter's name tattooed on this side of his neck, and he's just, he's so conflicted. He's a fighter, but he's also he's got love for his family.
Yeah, live by a code.
Exactly. And he's so confrontational. He thinks everyone is out to get him. And he's been with us for a couple months now. And I saw him this morning. He's got a smile on his face. I asked him to do anything. He says, I'm happy to do it. What's happening is his peers are holding him accountable.
That's the key.
All day long to where he's changing. And I see him because one of Red Barn Enterprises, because what's cool about our program, when you're done with 2 years, we have what's called Red Barn Enterprises. So these guys can move out of the bunkhouse and move over into the alumni housing. And we're going to build that this fall. We only have room for 44 students right now. Ultimately, we'd like to have between 150 and 200 students at Red Barn. So we already have Red Barn Construction, we have Red Barn Lawn Care. And so I tell you about this particular student without disclosing his name, but we're building Red Barn Chicken. Now, Red Barn Chicken is going to be a restaurant that these guys are going to help build. They're helping us right now with the theming of it, with the menu. And then these are going to be the guys that are going to run the kitchen. Well, this guy I'm talking about with the brass knuckles, he's going to be the same guy that's going to be serving you chicken fingers, and we're going to tell his story on storyboards inside the restaurant because he's going to be a success story, and he's going to be one of the best success stories of Red Barn. And so our goal is going to be something cheesy like, save the world from addiction, eat more chicken. Right. And so what's cool about it is these Red Barn Enterprises, the profits that come off of these will go back to Red Barn and help continue our mission and build more housing. Because really when it comes down to it, these guys need housing and jobs. Yeah. And so that's what we're all about.
And continue to live that lifestyle, which they can do while they're with you. I mean, as he mentioned, I don't know how much you know about Delancey Street, but but in other TCs, what he's doing is so revolutionary here. But the beauty is it works. It's proven to work. Delancey Street's the largest moving company in San Francisco. It's also their cafe.
Yeah.
I mean, is one of the best cafes. You'll see people, third generation gang member on average, third generation gang member, 10 years in prison and something like 22 felonies or something, that are in tuxes you walk in, you think they're the maitre d', you know, and so I can't wait to see Red Barn Chicken because it's gonna do it. It's gonna actually. I'm gonna
It'll
be
be cool.
eating there.
It'll be cool.
It's incredible because you see people. That's the biggest problem is people can't get out of the system.
Mm-hmm.
They can't get jobs.
Yeah, they can't get into the new system.
They can't get a place to live. Like, you know, you're talking like people with 27 felonies.
Yeah.
Like they can't. And so then they get out and they're trying to compete in real life and make it happen. And how? Yeah. You know, so it sounds like what you're doing is you're giving them that how.
Right.
You know, it's incredible.
And you know something else along those lines of something that is different than a lot of treatment centers. I was just listening to when you were talking about, you know, telling this guy like, you know, you might do 10 to 12 months on this. Sure, but you could also do the 10 years if you mess up, and how you interview these people so carefully. You know, so many of the treatment centers out there and out here, out everywhere, they're trying to talk people into coming into their program. It almost seems like you're trying to talk people out of coming into the program because you want the people to actually show you, look, I don't care what you're saying, Mike. I'm coming to your program and I'm going to do my best and I'm going to surprise you.
Yeah,
that's exactly it's such a different model.
Yeah, you need to prove to me and to Red Barn, and even we do a commitment ceremony after 30 days. So a lot of times they still don't know what they're signing up for. I mean, they shave every single day. I mean, there's consequences and there's a discipline tied to every part of their day. And I say it, you got to trust the process. There's a method to the madness, but they make a commitment at the end of 30 days. And, you know, I learned that I did an internship at the Haven, you know, and I'm a big fan of the Haven. And I remember sitting there, and as they would vote people in and vote people out, it was, you know, kind of a modified therapeutic community. Right. But I remember thinking how important that is for them to make a commitment to the community and then the community to make that commitment back to them. So yeah, it is. I mean, it's a process. It's evolving. We like to see ourselves as kind of our own modified therapeutic community. Right. But we believe in confrontation. We have games, which comes from Delancey Street. Right. We do what's called haircuts, where we will metaphorically give someone a haircut on the floor in front of their peers to break them down. So it is very confrontational that way. Absolutely. We are, you know, we try to work on our language. You know, if you say the F word, you got to do 50 push-ups. So we're trying to clean up our language, our appearance. You know, we're a nicotine-free campus, and all of us, myself included, you know, smoked right for a couple years after I got sober. And so it's a whole lifestyle. Wow. You know, and that's why I love what you guys are doing with WAR and what Fit to Recover, what Ian's doing. And, you know, we talked about this before. We need to have more alternatives because for me, recovery is a lifestyle. If it was just going to meetings and reading a big book and meeting with my sponsor, forget about it. It wouldn't work for me. Right. It's got to be a way of life. It has to be fun. Absolutely. You know, we get our guys engaged through the Addict to Athlete program, the couch to 5K to where we're doing marathons and half marathons and, you know, these Spartan races. And, you know, we call it trading up, right? I'm still crazy. I've still got this thinking going on, and I need to channel it now in the right direction. I mean, my wife got mad at me the other day because I was trying to find a swimming pool, and I couldn't find one that was open. And I was losing my mind. And I said, well, sweetie, at least I'm not running around town looking for pills or looking for a liquor store, right? I've still got the same mind up here. Yeah. I still need the support. We believe in that this is a we program, that we have to do this together. Right. So, yeah, I mean, we still have a long ways to go, but we're pretty passionate about what we're doing, and we're excited about the direction we're headed.
What would you say to the people, Mike, that are really committed to getting better, but you know how it is. I mean, with TCs and therapeutic communities, for those that don't know that the abbreviation, TCs. I mean, give some example of. I'm going to give examples of modified TCs for the listeners that might have heard. An Odyssey House, more of the true TC senses. It would be more of like a Delancey Street or a Red Barn or the Other Side Academy, Vulcan Academy, things like that. And I can explain true later if that's even necessary. We'll do a breakdown maybe after this episode in a separate one to talk about some of these things. But for those that say, to those that are really committed, but they've heard all these horror stories from those that haven't committed to the process and have left early, that, oh, you're just going to fail. You know, don't even go there. You're just going to fail. But they really want it. What would you say to them to encourage them to try something like this?
Well, you know, it's
And I know you're trying to talk him into doing it, but you know what I
no,
mean.
it's one of those things. Really, what do you got to lose, right? We'll always refund your misery. You know, I tell my guys all the time, you can go back out whenever you want and pick up. You know, my guys will come in and they bring in some of these words I don't even understand because I've been to jail multiple times, but I've never been to prison.
Right.
So I don't understand their lingo, and they start talking in this. And I just say, stop, you guys. You got to. You guys asked me to help pull you out of the system. We bring in these amazing facilitators and mentors. I said, do you think, John talks like this? Do you think Steve talks like this? And so you want so bad to come in and live a happy, healthy lifestyle. That whole gang mentality, that prison mentality. I would say, if you want to go back and become a professional prisoner, I can make that happen. I tell judges all the time, what do you have to lose, judge? Send him to me. If it doesn't work, I'll drive him down and drop him off at the point of the mountain, right? So at the end of the day, what do you guys really have to lose? But I tell families all the time, where there's hope, where there's life, there's hope. Thank God my family didn't give up on me.
Right.
I mean, the population we're working with, to put it in perspective, it's the bottom 10%.
Right.
Families have given up on them. The criminal justice system has given up on them. The state agencies have given up on them. All they want to do is throw these guys in prison. And I tell my guys, everyone loves a good comeback story. There's not a better comeback than you guys that are facing, 20, 30 years in prison. Everyone's looking for us to fail. Everyone's still waiting for me to fail. They're waiting for me to slip up because that's our track record, right? So for me to motivate these guys, it's actually pretty simple. I try to identify what they're looking for and what, we had a recovery capital class on this 2 weeks ago about really what is your motivation here? Draw me a picture. Help me paint that. Let's put that up on the wall. Let's look at that every single day. What does motivate you? And at the end of the day, some people I had a guy in my program 3 months ago, and he asked me to go back to prison. He says, Mike, I can't do this. I've been, incarcerated and institutionalized for over 20 years. When you ask me, hey, what do you want to do today? And he becomes crippled. He needs someone to tell him what to do. I saw him one day and I said, dude, what are you struggling with? He says, well, I don't know if I should put shoes on or boots for the job today. He struggles making decisions for himself, right? And so there are people out there that I'm convinced that do better being in that type of a structured environment.
Sure.
But I'm always a fan of second, third, fourth chances, and whatever we got to do to, I love doing, you being a sales guy, doing the takeaway. You probably can't handle Red Barn. You probably can't do it.
Right.
And whatever psychologically that I got to say to these guys to help get them motivated, I'll do it.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of a social experiment, which maybe sounds bad, but I'm looking for ways to poke and prod at these guys because I want them to experience every emotion hundreds of times and not get high. Yeah. I would be remiss if someone left Red Barn and went out and had an experience and said, I don't know how to handle this.
Right.
So I want them to learn what to do when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're angry, they're full of rage, and not go get high and not punch someone in the face. Those are life skills that treatment centers don't teach.
Right.
I didn't learn those in treatment.
It's so true.
And that's how you stay sober. You letting all your problems hit you in the face 150,000 times.
Yeah.
And what I love and what I'm getting from you, and I say this when in my groups, is like, if you're gonna beat heroin, and these guys that have let's just talk about heroin, that have put a needle in their arm and have gone that far with that type of substance, to get off of that, you have to be a hard worker. Like, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Like just what you're saying. Putting together a way of life and then sticking to it.
Right.
It's like even me with the gym. People they're like, man, what do you, how often do you go to the gym and how you do your nutrition? I'm just like, dude, I owe the gym. I owe good nutrition. I owe my reading. I owe my meetings.
Yeah.
And
I like that.
And so, like, it's pretty simple. And I can't stay sober. I haven't proven that if I don't put these things in place, then it's just like you guys talking about your meetings. You owe that. You do it.
You're right.
It's what you have to do. And how do you teach that?
Well,
how do you teach people that that's what it's going to take for you to stay off heroin?
Right.
You know?
Well, I think that what Mike's doing is exactly that. You teach it until it's almost something that doesn't need to be taught anymore, or something that doesn't even need to be conscious anymore, is I guess the word, because it's your lifestyle now, right? Your gym is your lifestyle. Yeah, you owe it on the days when you're having a tough
Like even
motivation.
days that I'm in shitty,
Right.
You know, I'm in a bad mood and I don't want to do anything. I still
But how
gotta
long
do-
part of your
how long
life
have you
now.
been doing it?
Right, long time.
Yeah. That's why I believe there's no substitute for time. I just tell my guys,
Absolutely.
trust the process. You will get to a point and you'll learn this behavior. You'll learn to become a man of integrity. You'll learn how to become honest. You know, we have, you know, one of our promises, we have what's called the 7 promises, and, you know, act as if until it becomes a habit.
Right.
And so you do it over and over and over again. Some people say, well, I can think my way into good action. That hasn't been my experience. My experience is I have to do the action over and over again
Repetition.
till it becomes part of who I am.
Yep.
We call that our routine to stay clean.
Yep.
So yeah, our guys, I tell my guys all the time, I wish you believed in you the way that I believe in you.
Right.
Because when I bring guys into my program, I can see their rap sheet. I know how many felonies and what they've done. But as far as I'm concerned, they have a clean slate when they come to Red Barn.
Right.
You know, they get there. This is their do-over. This is their mulligan in golf. And this is your chance. And we believe in you. We support you. We're going to help you get back on your feet. But you are going to work your guts out. It's hard.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you guys. I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can compare it to being, you know, a missionary for 2 years. But what these guys do, having that mindset and the triggers and the cravings, I mean, it's tough. My heart goes out to them. And sometimes I see them and I just say, you guys need to give yourselves a break and give yourself a hug. And at the end of the day, I really have 2 goals as the director of Red Barn. Keep these guys safe, get them sober, keep them sober for 2 years. So I said, if nothing else, you can hate my guts. And I don't care if you like me or dislike me. That doesn't matter. I'm going to save your life, because when you leave here, you're going to have 2 years of sobriety and you're going to have a work ethic that's going to continue through the rest of your life.
But you say that knowing that that's not going to be the case, meaning you say that knowing that after 2 years, that hate's going to go away.
Yeah.
They're not going to hate you anymore. You know, I remember a guy, because I as I was mentioning, I did 2 years. I spent more than 2 years at a you know, long-term therapeutic community, and especially when it was very much less modified than many are now, and I remember a guy named Danny who'd been a graduate with 25 years sobriety calling up and saying, you know, cherish the time when you're GIing in a group on hold, which means when you're cleaning doorknobs because someone's not taking responsibility and everyone's been sent out to clean the house until you go back in and someone tries it again in a group. He said, cherish those moments, because a time's going to come in your life when you actually miss it. And it's true. I miss it. When you're saying potentially having that opportunity to have a weekend or something, that would be phenomenal, because I miss it. And even through a relapse, after hadn't been sober for so long, even after the relapse, I still continued to make my bed every day.
Yeah.
It's amazing how those things just become routine, and you start liking them, you start missing them. So, you know, even though it's that whole attitude of, you know, you might hate my guts, you end up loving your lifestyle as long as you stay through it. You just have to commit to stay. I would always tell people, just no matter what, commit to staying and doing and working. That's it. That's it. You don't need to like me. You don't need to do anything. As long as you stay, and here's what I would also say. You know, here's the thing, is if you leave, the moment you leave, whether 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 hours, 5 years, at some point you might regret it. You might regret it. You might possibly say, oh, you know what, I shouldn't have left. If you just stay till tomorrow, there's no way you'll say, I regret staying. You'll never would have said, oh, you know what, I should have left yesterday, because you can just leave today.
Yeah.
You know, it's like just do that extra one more time. And gosh, I could geek out in so many things on talking about TCs and things like that, but what Mike's doing is truly needed more in Utah, and I'm so glad you're doing it the way you're doing it.
Well, to put it in perspective, because I was talking to the Other Side Academy the other day, and you know, I think they have over 100 students. They'll bump it up to 200 or 300. We'll be up to a couple hundred, and we'll be there without even tapping into the Weber County Jail or the Salt Lake County Jail.
Yeah.
So I mean, the need, and I've heard the Vulcan Academy is probably going to come to Utah, which we welcome them. We feel like that there needs to be more options related to this, longer term, work, discipline, things like that.
Especially when 90% aren't fit for your treatment center.
Isn't it? I don't know. I don't know the statistics, maybe, but like the jails. I mean, isn't it just jam packed, and every one of them substance abuse, right? I mean,
Yeah.
These
We
days.
do have a rule though at Red Barn, just to put it in perspective, is we don't talk about drugs.
Yep.
We don't talk about alcohol, and we don't talk about our past. Because sometimes I get a kick out of people be like the opioid epidemic, and I'm thinking it's not about the opioids. 10 years from now, it's going to be cocaine. 20 years from now, it's going to be meth. Let's talk about the behavior.
The behavior.
If we can change the behavior, it has nothing to do. I mean, I was asked to speak at a conference and talk about the positive effects of Matt, and I said, I don't think you guys want to hear me speak because I don't believe in really what's going on with the opioid epidemic. I know we have to talk about it for funding. I know there's grant money and we can study it, but my personal opinion is it's not about the opioids.
Right.
So that's why one of the rules is we don't need to romance our war stories. I don't care
Criminal
how much
pride,
dough,
all that,
kind of stuff. We're talking about being present and moving forward.
Wow.
So yeah, whether it's gambling, whether it's, alcohol, drugs, pornography, to us, it's all the same. There's just unhealthy behaviors. Because see, someone with integrity doesn't go and steals mom's credit card, steals dad's car, and then ends up down at Pioneer Park slamming dope. They don't do that.
Not a natural progression.
Right?
Yeah.
So someone with integrity, they do the next right thing. And, that's why I think society, we miss it. And we put the energy and we focus on the problem. Therefore, the problem gets bigger, right? At Red Barn, we're really trying to redirect that energy and focus on the solution. So instead about talking about drugs and alcohol, I remember when I came out of treatment, they said, Mike, you got to go to some smoking cessation classes. Okay, great. I went in and went to class for 2 hours, talked about smoking. Well, what did I want to do when I came out?
Light up 5 of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't get enough nicotine in
Right.
my body, right? So we go to these rehab facilities and we talk about addiction and what's going on. I love Kevin McCauley, but we talk about what's going on in the brain,
Right.
and we're giving ourselves an out, because at the end of the day, I want an out.
Right.
So if and when I relapse, because it's part of my story, well, it's a disease.
Yeah.
We don't give our guys that out. We teach them to take ownership, and we focus on enlarging the solution, which is the integrity, the honesty, commitments, all that kind of stuff. So we stay away from all that other stuff.
Wow.
Can they talk about it in group?
Yeah. So in my
Yeah,
my
just not on the
recovery,
floor.
on my recovery capital group, we'll go into, because I think it's important to remember your last relapse or your last detox, because I believe if you can't remember it, it probably won't be your last one.
Very true.
So I'll have them draw pictures of it, and we do it in a controlled environment. But it's an automatic 2 hours of community service if you talk about your past, if you use drug talk or gang talk.
Like them together. Like
Yeah.
Okay.
What are some more of the consequences? I mean, in whether or not you want to go into
No,
too
that's
much, but
fine. That's
I just
fine.
love. I mean, of course, in TCs that they go. I mean, you're talking people that left the toilet seat down when urinating on them. I'm not saying this at Red Barn, but you wear a toilet seat around your neck for a month.
Yeah, we don't do that. But
visual awareness.
But I
right?
think I don't think we're far off from that. Talking to the guys at Delancey Street, if they're a 10, Tosa is probably a 7 or 8, because of the guys who run that, which I admire and just have so much respect for. In fact, they're probably tired of me calling them, because when I get off track, I've got their director on speed dial to say, hey, Dave,
Wow.
hey, Alan, what do I do with this? And, they reel me right back in. They're probably a 6 or a 7. We're probably a 4 or 5 on the level of intensity.
Right.
But what's important and what I've learned is to my guys, we're a 10.
Right.
And that's what's important to them.
Absolutely.
So if we have 3
Absolutely.
cardinal rules, you can't, no violence, no threats of violence, and no drug or alcohol use. Now, the violence and threats of violence, that's out of my control. Right. And a lot of my guys, which is amazing, because I had a judge say to me the other day, he says, Mike, so you're telling me you're going to put all these drug addicts, alcoholics, liars, cheats, and thieves into your facility, there's not going to be any supervision? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to ask them to do it. I'm going to ask them to follow the rules. I'm going to treat them like human beings, because they are human beings.
Yeah.
I said, Your Honor, the reason why they act like animals over here in your jail is because you treat them like animals. I mean, at the end of the day, all these guys want is what I believe is the solution for addiction, which is human connection.
Right.
They want some love.
Right.
They want to be accepted.
Self-love, yeah, both.
And so it's real interesting because there's what we call contracts. Now, contracts can
I was
be...
going to say, to use the term contracting.
Yeah, we use the term contract. In fact,
Yeah.
I've got 2 guys on contracts today. One was for passing a note to a girl at the gym, which we later found out about. So he's going to be on a couple of day contract for that, which means he's picking up rocks from one of the pastures and building a rock wall. And he'll do that for 10 hours today and 10 hours tomorrow.
Yeah.
Community service is a big one. And what we do is we double up at Red Barn. So if we have another altercation like that, instead of a 2-day, it'll be a 4-day. It can get up to 7 days or even longer.
Right.
I've made a commitment to my board that I'm not kicking anyone out of my program. We've had some situations where I've asked people to leave, and it hasn't ended well. So my job going forward is meaning that when they leave, I get messages or I hear what's going on, and whether they're overdoses, whether they're deaths, whether there are other things that happen, I'll do anything I can to keep someone in the program. But I will break them down, and I'll break them down through the manual labor that we offer at Red Barn. Wow. So it's digging ditches, it's picking up rocks. You can imagine, I mean, there's plenty to do at a farm.
Sure.
And there's always manual labor.
That's the first time I've heard of any program have that philosophy of we're not kicking anybody out, especially in this type of mentality. But if you think about it, it is a metaphor for life. Like you said, like you just said, it's a metaphor for life because you said it didn't end well when you kick these guys out. Well, if you think of regular life, you can't kick yourself out of life. Well, or you can, and that's exactly what's happened. So you're trying to really mirror life where it's like, no, you're not getting out of this. This is your life. Yeah. Let's find out how to actually put enough things in place to change you. That's big.
Yeah,
that's
they know I'm not giving up on them because I've been clear with them. If you leave here, you're going to die.
Right.
That's been my experience. The population that we're working with, it doesn't end well. They're lucky if they go back to jail. So we've had people leave the program, and we get warrants, and we do an order to show cause. And I sleep better at night when I know they've been picked up and they're back locked up.
Yeah, if they break a cardinal rule, absolutely.
And they leave and they walk out because we don't have locks on our facility. They can leave whenever they want to.
Right.
But yeah, when they go, it's tough because it doesn't. There's never a good outcome.
Right.
To that. So.
Yeah, it's so true. You said 3 cardinal rules. You said. No violence, no drugs and alcohol. Is the third one knowledge of anyone else?
No, just threats of violence.
Okay, gotcha.
Because of this population, we're a men's only facility. We're adults. Every one of us are fighters, and all of us have that type of a background. So we don't bring people in that have serious violent crimes. We consider if there's some domestic violence and things like that. But yeah, threats of violence, and no drugs or alcohol.
Right.
Anything else past the smoking. I've even had guys who have come clean on, they've been out on a job site and found some marijuana and got high, right?
Right.
They came clean on that. I restarted them. One was 3 months in the program. One was 9 months. They started over. Now they're on day one.
Day one of the 2-year program.
We packed all their stuff up. We walked outside.
Across the street.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
I introduced myself. My name's Mike. Who are you? What are you doing here? We bring them in. We sit them on what's called the bench, which all these therapeutic communities, sometimes you can sit on the bench for 6 hours, 8 hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We just stick them there. There's
you gotta
not
wait till you're ready to be showered in or whatever the process is.
Yep. So, and we take, they come in, we give them all their clothes. We take everything away from them. One guy came in and says, well, I don't do yellow shirts. I said, all right, give the guy 3 yellow shirts, right? It's all about breaking down that image and then rebuilding them and building them back up. That the yellow shirts, there's something obviously more going on there.
Absolutely.
So that's where we start, is breaking them down from the moment they walk in. And someone may come in off the street and interview for the program. They'll sit on the bench. They'll come sit in my office. If I don't like what I'm hearing, I'll stick them back out on the bench. And the litmus test that we're able to run with that bench is just amazing because some guys after 2 hours, they can't handle it. They're losing their mind and they're out. And then they'll come back the next day and then they'll leave. And it's just this back and forth because we want to make sure that they're right for the program.
Absolutely.
So most therapeutic communities have a bench.
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
You just go sit on the bench.
You have those. And then also, some of them also have, so at Odyssey we had, it was called the CO, the communications office is where the bench was. And you'd be walked across the street, you'd come back, and then you could either be restarted, which you'd restart, do the same type of thing,
Yep.
or you'd be put into what's called motivation, which was literally a phase where you had to work for about a week to even prove that you're even willing and worthy to be there. And I'm talking working meant just labor. Every day while people are in groups doing this type of stuff, doing a recreation, you're in the kitchen cleaning pots and pans. You're doing something, whatever it might be, just to prove, to maybe have a chance to be let back in. Now, not everyone does that, but my point is that everyone has these types of things, because you can't give those chances back freely. You have 12 slots there. People are there and they need to show they really need to be there and that they're willing to start back over. You can't just give it right back to them from day one.
Yeah.
Does this type of program piss people off? Like I don't know if this like traditional programs. Does it piss? I guess where I'm going is it
piss other programs off?
Does it piss other programs off, like the traditional? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they're being like, you're treating them.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what it does is it frustrates them.
Right.
Because I do have these conversations with other treatment providers, and they'll say things like, well, Mike, you don't offer medical, you're not offering the clinical, this population needs that. And my response is, I don't bring those people in. Okay.
Right.
So if someone has any history of mental illness, if they're on any type of psychotropic or even a psychoactive medication, we're referring them to where they need to be.
Right.
But I think the debate in the industry, in the recovery world, is everyone. We kind of paint everyone with this broad brush, right? If you're a recovering addict, you've got a co-occurring disorder going on. I disagree with that. That hasn't been my experience. I went back to school and got a social work degree, but I really want to go back and get a clinical psychology degree. And the reason for that is I don't suffer with depression. I don't suffer with, bipolar or schizophrenia or any of this other stuff. Right. I needed good discipline in my life. And so really that's what these therapeutic communities work for guys like me. I guarantee would have worked for my little brother and he'd still be here today. But yeah, there are some critics out there in our local, recovery community that are saying, hey, you guys are doing it wrong, or, you need to offer some clinical, or there needs to be some support here, or the old therapeutic model doesn't work. I disagree with them. Right. That's why, 90% of the people that applied, one of the, first things that we ask is, are you on any kind of meds? Because if you are, there's a facility. Last month we went out to North Carolina, and there's a therapeutic community out there called TROSA, not to be confused with TOSA. It started 24 years ago by Kevin McDonald, who was a graduate from Delancey Street, San Francisco. He was Mimi Silbert, the founder of Delancey Street, San Francisco. He was like their star student. Right. And she wanted him to go out to open up a Delancey Street out there. And it didn't work out, and so someone got a hold of him. He's got a great story. We spent about a week out there. But the first 12 years they were open, they didn't offer meds and clinical services. Well, today they do. So when I interview someone and they fit our criteria for a therapeutic community, but say they're on, a Wellbutrin or they're on some kind of a mood stabilizer, we'll send them back to TROSA. They have 520 students in their program. I mean, it's an amazing facility that they've got back there that's spread all over Durham, and they do wonderful work. But see, they have the resources now. They've been around for 24 years. I wouldn't be so naive to sit here and say that we will never have a clinical component.
Sure.
Or we'll never offer meds. If that is where this path or the journey that we're on, we're staying open-minded to the process. But their first 12 years, they did not offer any clinical. So I am a believer there is a way to do both. But to answer your question, I think we are an enigma here in the community. And I think most of it is lack of education. There was a reputation, especially in the old Odyssey House days. And that's why the county came in and said, if you're going to receive our funding, you got to switch this up.
You got to change all these things, right?
And so
that was pre that. Yeah.
We're not as hardcore, but I still think that there's some critics out there saying, and we're just saying that's cool. We'll roll with it.
Well, in both ways, it goes both ways, because I remember that from being a TC grad and seeing all my friends that would not get sober, going to the traditional quote unquote program, I was saying, gosh, why can't these programs just do stuff more like TCs?
Yeah.
And so there really is kind of that. I mean, there is it's being bridged a bit more, but there is frustration both ways. At least I'm not speaking for Mike, of course. I'm just saying from my experience working for TCs.
Kind of the reason I mean, because it's like with war, me starting war, you know, it was a different approach. And I remember early on, and you have therapists come and be like, you know, just people who are so we're so into the traditional, can't see past or can't be creative on different levels. And so I had some issues with different professionals as I was moving, just with my little, recovery nonprofit gym where I was, surrounding them by alumni and just trying to get them sober,
which is very TC like.
Very doing the same. I mean,
especially they were all living there at the gym on your floor, basically.
Well,
and you didn't have levels and stuff, but
yeah, mine was. I mean, yeah, it was pretty wild, some of the stuff, but I mean, but we help people, it's just, maybe it's not the same traditional model but it's still got people sober, so how it's just interesting, how there's so many different ways that people do it.
Well, we believe it's not a one size fits all, right?
Exactly.
In fact, when I first got sober, I was court ordered to do community service work, so I did it for USARA, for Mary Jo's group, the state advocacy group. And their mission statement says, we support everyone's individual path of recovery. And so every one of us, as original as each one of us are here, we all have our own recovery program. And what I'm doing today isn't what I was doing 5 years ago.
Right.
And I pray to God that I'm doing it differently 5 years from now, because I'm still so new in sobriety.
Right.
So this whole each one teach one concept that we believe at Red Barn, I don't need to bring in a doctor to tell my guys what it's like to detox off heroin and how to live a recovery lifestyle just because they've gone to school for it.
Right.
So we don't need the PhDs and the MDs. Now, is there a place for them? Absolutely. If someone's got some severe trauma and they've got to go back and do some of that work, then by all means, I tell judges all the time, listen, if you think someone needs treatment, don't send them to Red Barn. Let's send them to a treatment center. Let's go get them the treatment that they need. Now, if someone just needs some discipline and a good kick in the ass, I can help provide that. Red Barn can do that.
Absolutely.
But that's where we were talking about earlier, the insanity piece. I challenge the treatment providers to do something differently. Look at the recidivism. Look at the outcomes. That's why we started on this path. I don't want to be critical of the treatment world, because I am a product of that. But we wouldn't be happy with a 10% success rate. I mean, I can't believe anyone in any job or any professional sport, if they were only 10% successful, they could even maintain their job. But for some reason, we've accepted that in the treatment world, that, okay, that's all right. That's just standard. It's not standard. And we're not going to bat 1,000, but we think we can be 50% easy at Red Barn.
Right. As long as you stay.
Yeah, just stay. If you'll stick around, we will definitely give you a really good chance at being successful. So,
and far more successful than if you just kicked drugs early on in life.
Yeah.
Far more successful. You're going to learn the things that I dare say 75+% of people out there that have no issues with drugs or alcohol don't even know how to do. I dare say that everyone could benefit if they could have a very modified type of Red Barn experience, would learn so much from it. I would have families tell me when I was in Odyssey, I would have family members tell me, gosh, it sounds like something I need to do.
Exactly.
I'm like, you don't even drink, Grandma. She's like, it just sounds like
it's life,
it'd
right?
be so good to get these things. It's life.
Right. We have a board member that says there's two types of people in this world, those of us in recovery and those that should be. So really at the end of the day, what it comes down to is we're all recovering from something.
Right.
We just love to use drugs and alcohol, and we like to shine a magnifying glass on that and make a big deal about it when it's really not that.
Yeah, our escapes are very deadly. That's one of the differences. We happen to escape in a very deadly way and have behaviors that are so damn bad that we have to escape all the time. It's, gosh, I met you first when you might not remember. It was when I was the director of marketing for Wasatch, and it was at the golf tournament last year.
Okay.
And I was with Melanie. And
Yes,
we were
Melanie
on the
Tackett,
hole. Yeah, I met you there, and it was just you guys were about to hit, and so. And she was telling me all about you, and she still didn't. She's not a big TC person, so she hadn't shared that much with me, but she was just saying how, you know, how amazing you are, how amazing your program is, et cetera. And ever since then, I mean, I trust what she says when it comes to programs. And so I would, ever since then, I was like, gosh, I want to hear his story. Then the other night when you spoke and I missed it, I was really bummed. Then when Dustin was saying, hey, what about Mike? I was like, this is the guy I want to have up here. And then when you came up here, when you came up here and started talking CC stuff, TC, I'm just like, oh, yeah.
I was happy to get you on, and I appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you for inviting me. When you reached out to me, I think my little boy Maverick was just born, and I'm really trying hard to do a better job of saying no, right? You know, I tell my guys, no's a complete sentence. And
very true.
And so I'm trying hard to practice that in my life and find balance. But, you know, my life has settled down a little bit compared to where it was.
How old's your little boy?
So he's 2.5 months.
Yeah, I got a little 5-month-old.
Sleeping?
I mean, I'm doing better than my wife.
Yeah, right?
I can't act like, you know.
My shift is the 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. shift. And just really, we've turned the corner in the last 2 nights because he started now putting together like 3 or 4 hours of sleep together at night. So I just feel like I've got it. We've got it figured out, which we don't. You know, being almost 42 years old and having a newborn, that's probably one of the things that motivates me too with my recovery because, you know, at the end of the day, my little boy never has to see his dad drunk.
No.
Never has to see his dad behind bars.
Right.
You know, that's a big deal for me when I felt like that was going to be, you know, my life, the rest of my life.
Yeah. I was excited because my first two kids, I got an 11 and 8-year-old, and, you know, those first 3 years of my little girl's life, you know, I was high, you know, and so it's weird. I'm more mature, and you know, I say it every day. I'm so thankful for where I'm at.
Yeah.
You know, as a man and spiritually, and, you know, with my kids and with this new little baby, like I'm way tougher or something, you know.
Yeah.
My wife's way better. I don't know. It's been a good experience because we weren't going to have any more.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 38. She's 37. Yeah. But
Well, I applaud you for what you're doing, and you too, Don. I mean, to be able to get out and tell our stories, I feel like, you know, we have so many wonderful resources here in our community, and we can do a better job of leveraging those and coming together and doing events and, you know, really, you know, I just feel like there's a lot of work to do in this space right now. And so I applaud you guys for doing the podcast and, you know, whatever we can do at Red Barn to support it. You know, we have an open door policy there. So I mean,
to do an episode there someday.
Yeah,
we really should, and we really should probably tie it into, you know, a fundraiser, you know, for WAR, for Red Barn. You know, we've got the Legacy Trail right there, so we've got the 5K set up where we can do that. We can, you know, we should get like, you know, Jared from Recovery Strong. We should get Ian and, you know, Rob Eastman and all the guys. We should just get everyone together and come together, because I know we're split up. So we got so many commitments going on, but if we could get together once a year. And do something and just make that an annual event. I like it as an alternative to, you know, the biopsychosocial model. You know, I guess that's what they call it in the treatment world.
Yeah.
But I like being, you know, kind of out there. I love the shock factor. You know, one of my favorite things to do is to wear my shirt that says, and I almost wore it the night at the men's meeting because I love to wear it when I'm chairing. It says, "I am not anonymous."
Yeah.
And I love getting a rise out of the old timers because I'm not anonymous.
Right.
If you know me, you know I'm in recovery.
Right.
And I think we do such a disservice to the recovery community.
I agree.
By being, you know, anonymous and the whole thing. For me, if you know me, you know I'm in recovery.
Right.
So I applaud you guys for what you guys are doing.
Gosh,
whatever we
thank
can
you.
do to support
that
you.
would be that's a great idea. That's a great idea. That would be fun.
Thanks
do
for
something, do a
coming
live
on.
one. What about a challenge?
Oh yeah, so we usually do a little challenge every week.
Okay.
Just for the listeners, like, what can you tell somebody to do that they could do, like maybe something in the morning, just maybe something daily that they could put into their life?
Well,
could be prayer, could be some form of exercise. I mean, whatever you think. Could be hit a meeting.
so I would say right now what I'm focused on, and what I'm working with the guys, we do something like this each week at Red Barn. So we're doing the gratitude list thing. But what I'm trying to encourage the guys to do is we teach them the difference between spirituality and religion. You know, growing up in this community, I think we use those terms synonymously.
Right.
We
Very
don't
much.
teach that at Red Barn. So what I'm trying to do is create an awareness around the spiritual side of what we call mind-body bridging, which is just a fancy word for mindfulness.
Right.
So whether it's just sitting and being quiet, whether it's saying a prayer and, you know, and listening, that's something that my guys really struggle with because they spend so much time up here in their head. This has been their escape for so long when they're locked up that their minds just race and race and race. And so I'm constantly inviting my guys, be present. Get here, be here with me right now, because most of the time they're either thinking about what they were just doing or what they're getting ready to do. So we're working on, it's as simple as just a 10-minute mindfulness practice.
Wow.
Right.
So we set the tone with kind of a thought for the day. I have them create their own mission statement. It's a mantra that has to do with what their motivation is. So they read that and then they quiet their mind for 10 minutes every day. And then after that, then they write about it. So it's about a 20-minute exercise.
Wow.
So they're reading their mission statement, their mantra, they're quieting their mind, and then they're writing and putting pen on paper. Because for me, something magical happens when I put that pen on paper.
Yes.
And so that would be the challenge.
Wow.
I really firmly believe that if we could leave our homes and go out into the world each day and be centered and full of love and, you know, be non-judgmental and more accepting, I think to perpetuate that energy for us, for me, that's contagious. Right. So when someone smiles at me or holds a door, you know, unexpectedly for me, I smile, and then in my mind, I'm thinking, I want to do that same thing and I want to pay it forward.
Right.
So I guess that would be the challenge that I would have. And that's what, in fact, that's what we're doing this week at Red Barn.
Perfect.
So
How can people find you? We'll summarize that at the bottom of the comments just so you guys know the challenge. But how can people find you?
Yeah, are you on Instagram, Facebook?
yeah,
You doing-
so I mean, we didn't even get into this, but I'm Johnny Farmer on social media. That's a whole nother story.
Gotcha.
My
We'll
middle
be having
name's
you back,
Johnny,
that's for sure.
and I'm a wannabe farmer. We're saving lives now, is what we're doing. But yeah, so I'm on Facebook on Johnny Farmer. I'm on Instagram as Johnny Farmer, and then we're out. I think it's www.redbarnfarms.org.
Yeah. Perfect.
is where we're at. So yeah, anyone can reach out to us. Like I said, there's no cost to come to Red Barn. If nothing else, I think we're a great resource to get people where they need to go. So even if they don't feel like they're appropriate for our program, we'll get them to WAR. We'll get them to one of these other facilities that they need to go, because we're just interested in helping people, you know, get on the right path.
Well, thank you for being on.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.
That was fun. I
Gosh,
appreciate you
that was
guys.
Great. We'll have you back for sure.